We've all been part of icebreaker activities that feel like they're forcing fun. But icebreaker games don't have to be that cringy. There's ways that you can increase energy and get people moving about in like a game-like fashion, but still with a purpose. In this video, I share 3 icebreaker activities that are more energetic than your basic icebreaker questions or connection stories, but they still have a purpose and they're not cringy at all. Hi, I'm Kerry Price. I'm the founder of the Facilitators Network, and I use deliberate generosity to make sure that no meeting or workshop is ever wasted. I've been facilitating for 20 odd years, and in that time I've led thousands of meetings, workshops, and community conversations. Nowadays, I help other trainers and facilitators do that well. I don't know about you, but when I hear the term icebreaker games, I want to leave the room. Not because icebreakers are necessarily bad, it's just that some games are so cringy and so over the top that far from warming people up, they actually push people way out of their comfort zone and have the absolute opposite effect. So in this video, I'm going to share 3 games that actually have a purpose. They help people connect to each other and, in the right way, connect to the purpose of the session. Here's 3 of my favorites. Game number 1 is called the name game. And from the title, it would suggest that it's all about learning people's names. And that's kind of the point. But actually there's something deeper to this activity than just finding out who you're standing beside. This activity actually sets the scene to tell people it's okay to fail. In fact, we can put ourselves out there, we can take a little bit of a risk, get things wrong, and have a good laugh about it. Here's how it works. To start with, I invite people to stand up and form a circle. I frame it that it's about learning people's names, and even though they may know each other already, I don't. So it's an opportunity for us to learn each other's names together. Now we start off simple, and I invite people to just say their own name. So I'd say Kerry, Mark would say Mark, Rob would say Rob, and we go around the circle. Easy peasy. Then we make it a little harder. We need to turn to our left and say the name of the person beside us. So I'd say Mark, Mark would say Rob, so on and so forth. We whip around the circle. People are like, what is the point of this? I assure them that we're getting there and this is just warming up. And I invite people to turn to their right and now repeat the process. This whole thing only takes a couple of minutes, and I congratulate people on knowing their own name and the names of the people standing next to them. But then we get a little bit trickier. The next step is an invitation to call the name of someone across the circle. So I might call Corbin, and I start walking towards Corbin. And before I get there, Corbin needs to call somebody else's name to unlock his space. He can only start moving once he's called somebody else's name. Now it gets a bit chaotic because people feel under pressure. I'm walking towards them. They start moving without saying someone's name, or they're staring at their best friend across the circle and their name just goes absolutely blank. We end up laughing, and what we recognize is actually it's okay to stuff up in this space. If we can stuff up with simple things like knowing each other's names, all of the other stuff is going to be okay too. Game number 2 is called Cross the Circle. And this is a game that's designed to find commonalities amongst people in the room. So we start by inviting people to stand in a circle, and then I stand in the middle and call out a statement. Now, if the statement I call out relates to people around the edge, they're then invited to cross the circle and find another space in the circle. So a bit like musical chairs that you would have played as a child. To kick things off, I keep the statements relatively safe, low risk. Cross the circle if you travelled here on public transport today, or cross the circle if you like pineapple on pizza. Whatever those kind of low-risk statements are in your context. But eventually you want the statements to relate to the purpose of the session. So cross the circle if you've ever experienced a really bad manager at work, Or cross the circle if you've ever been on the end of a comment that's made you feel really bad about your performance at work. Whatever the purpose of the session is, you can shape up statements that relate to that. Now, there's a couple of ways you can play this game. As the facilitator, you can stand in the center and call all of the statements. Or you can start opening it up to other people to call statements. So as you call something like cross the circle, if you like pineapple on pizza, you can jump into a gap, which will leave somebody else standing in the circle. Of course, when you pass over control to participants to call the statements, you might need to guide it back to the purpose of the session at some point. So just make sure that you end up back in the center when that's important to be done. Game number 3 is called string connection. And this really is one of my favorite activities to kick off a workshop. So much so that I probably use it in workshops way more than is necessary because it's so good. So how I kick this off is I invite people to get into pairs or groups of 3 and just share their responses to 3 questions. And the questions are usually pretty basic, something around introducing themselves. So tell me a little bit about who you are, whatever that means to you. Question 2 is more related to the context of the session. So it might be share a little bit about your experience in this particular space, this industry or the sector that we're working in. And then question 3 is what would you like to get out of today? So for you to leave at the end of the workshop and go, wow, that was amazing, that was so useful. What is it that you'd like to walk away with? So I invite people to get into pairs or groups of 3 and talk through those 3 questions. And then after 4 or 5 minutes, it doesn't need to be long, I invite those groups to come over and form a circle with the whole group. And I introduce this ball of string. Now, I start the process by sharing my responses to those 3 questions, and I invite people to really listen in for connections. So I might start by introducing myself and saying that I'm a mum and I'm a wife and I've got 6 children and 9 grandchildren and I live on 3 acres with a miniature pony and a couple of sheep. Other people in the circle might be listening to that and go, hey, I live in the country too, or hey, I'm a nana as well. It doesn't matter what the connection is. It's about listening in to find those commonalities. Then I will share my experience in the sector and what I'd like to get out of the day. Now, normally what I'd like to get out of the day, I say something along the lines of, I really want to make sure that today's workshop is useful and not just interesting. So I'd like to get out of today whatever you want to get out of the day because that's where my focus is. Once I've shared my responses to those 3 questions, I invite people to throw their hand in the air if they heard a connection. And usually almost everyone finds a connection to something. I then choose one person to toss the string to. So I hold this end of the string and I toss the ball to someone who has raised their hand for a connection. They then repeat the process, answer the 3 questions, people are listening in for connections, raise their hand at the end, and then once again, they stay holding on to the string and toss the ball. At the end of it, you've got this whole web of string connecting everyone to each other. And I simply ask, what did you notice about that activity? Now, always people notice things like, I could have connected to every single person in the room. I connected with people over things I didn't think anyone else had in common with me. There's this beautiful web of connections, and they're now visible by the use of the string. But what I love about this activity is that you can take it one step further and actually talk about the impact of how we show up in the room and how our behavior impacts others. So I suggest that how we show up matters. If I was to tug really hard on the string, it wouldn't just impact the person I was immediately connected to, it would actually impact everybody else in the circle. If I suddenly decided I didn't want to play anymore and I just dropped the string on the floor, it doesn't just impact the person directly connected to me, it impacts everyone else in the room as well. And so this activity is not just about getting to know each other and finding commonalities, It's a really nice segue into how do we want to show up together and how do we want to work for the most successful workshop for all of us. String Connections is one of my favorite icebreaker games, but there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all activity. It's helpful to have a whole bunch of different activities in your back pocket. So in my next video, Meaningful Icebreakers for Adults, I share 3 icebreaker activities with a slightly different feel. Those activities are all about checking in on how people are feeling as they enter the room. And it's particularly good for sessions where you know there's people who just don't want to be there. The link is in the description below. Go check it out.